Celebration is not Walt's experimental prototype community of tomorrow or Epcot. It certainly is not. But it is a very interesting community which Disney did plan and did create as a planned intentional community from the get-go. So on this episode, in this video, I wanted to go through a more detailed history of Celebration, which is a community I've talked about before, as well as a community I've represented in the past in my time as a special district lawyer in Central Florida. So I wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive and give you this little bit of Disney history and the ways in which Disney still controls the community and still exercises a lot of power over this now very large community. In fact, such a large community that it may become a city in the near future. As always, I am Andrew Esquire, a Florida attorney specializing in special districts, much like Celebration, and as well as this is the Legal Mindset channel where we teach you to be your own judge. So I was really driven to do a longer video on Celebration because it felt like in my last video when I talked about Celebration not being Epcot, I was so focused on proving that it is not Epcot that I forgot to just do a basic explanation of the history of Celebration. As well as I had many people react positively to my Disney history timeline video. So talking about Epcot, talking about development of Disney. So I wanted to get back into more history, educational type videos, which go along, and this does play into current events because as we look to whether or not, Disney still has their hands in the city planning, city development sphere, they kind of have one paw, you might say one rat's paw in the business there in Celebration. So we'll talk about that right away. So let's just get into it here with Celebration. So this is a nice view here of the downtown of Celebration. This is the front street rather that is facing the main stormwater pond. They may call it a lake, but it's really a large pond, a large stormwater pond, which is at the downtown of Celebration. This is in Celebration Village, which is at the core of the Celebration development. And this is very much the architecture for the commercial area in Celebration, as well as for Celebration as a whole. Now, to be clear, Celebration started, and the concept started quite a while ago. In fact, it started with the Celebration Company. Now, what is the Celebration Company? The Celebration Company is a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company. So the Celebration Company, much like many of the other entities that are just subsidiaries of Disney, Celebration Company was specifically built to oversee the design, marketing, and development of the community of Celebration. So they worked with architects to build out the original town center area and really had control over the community for decades until it turned over to resident control, both in terms of the HOA, and I know HOA has been trending now on Twitter, but in terms of the HOA, which has very, very strict aesthetic guidelines, and on top of that, in terms of the CDD, the Community Development District, or Special District, which controls Celebration. Much like Reedy Creek controlled Disney, now the CFTOD, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, which controls Disney and the Disney properties, the Celebration Community Development District, or CDD, controls Celebration. Now, as in contrast to RCID, now the CFTOD, the CDD has much fewer powers. In fact, it has very, very limited powers as to what it can and cannot do. We will get into those in a while. But just to start out, to understand that this was a development that was brought by the Celebration Company. Now, when they first planned this development, what they did was they removed the residential areas from Reedy Creek. So all of the potential residential areas were removed from Reedy Creek. Some limited area was kept within Reedy Creek and also within the boundaries of Celebration because it was conservation land, and Reedy Creek wanted to hang on to that conservation land so they could claim development credits. So that is a big thing that Reedy Creek did, so Disney could still claim those credits. Now, the Celebration Company was formed in 1991. This is Sunbiz, which is where you can look up any Florida business. So you can see the Celebration Company LLC was formed in 1991 and is still active to this day in 2023. Now, as we move along here, the CDD, the Celebration Community Development District, was created under Chapter 190 of the Florida statutes, and this is governed, right, by all the regular laws of Florida, the sunshine laws, the disclosure laws, transparency laws, and this is the entity that I previously represented. They have a manager, they've got an engineer, they've got lawyers, and they've got board members, which are now citizens, regular residents of Celebration. In fact, you can find all their meetings and documents right here on the Celebration CDD website, including the minutes of past meetings. Here you can see this is the establishment ordinance, which was established by the state, and it gave them powers to do basic services such as potable water, sewer, reuse water, surface water, roadways, bridges, streetlights, recreational improvements, fire prevention, mosquito control, and solid waste. Now, they don't do all these things themselves. In fact, some of these services are provided by other people. They have the power, for example, to start their own fire department. However, they contract with Osceola County to provide those services. And one important thing is this was approved in March of 94. And what I want to draw your attention to is here how Celebration was improved. It was approved before the governor and cabinet sitting in the Florida Land and Water Adjudicatory Commission. There was no public testimony for or against this rule. So this is one that, because it straddled RCID and Osceola County, because it was so large, it had to go to the governor, and the governor had to approve this. So all of those folks in the current controversy with Disney and the CFTOD and Disney and DeSantis that said, hey, this isn't normal for it to go before the governor, that is wrong. In fact, it is quite normal for districts to go before the governor. And in fact, in the initial period, the governor chose the board. Now, it just so happens that the developers, the Celebration Company, or TCC, gave recommendations as to who should be on the board. And surprise, surprise, of course, it was Disney cronies and Disney employees. Of course, they were allowed to do that because it was the initial term. There weren't really residents there yet. But after a certain period of time, it transitioned over to resident control, and now it is fully, all 5 out of 5 people within the Celebration board are Celebration residents. They live in Celebration. So moving on, from that, there is a list, an alphabet list of organizations that control Celebration. And I want to run through those with you because they're very relevant. So the first one here is the Celebration Residential Owners Association. Now, most of you are familiar with homeowners associations. In fact, Twitter has a huge debate as to whether or not homeowners associations are, valid or important, whether they do good or bad things. And I would like to know in the comments, what do you guys think about homeowners associations? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Are they great? Do they suck? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you haven't subscribed, please, I hope I have earned your subscription with all this coverage of Disney. If you are still watching, and I know there's at least 40 or 50% of you out there that have not subscribed, I would love if I've earned your subscription today. So CROA, or the Celebration Residential Owners Association, is the association which deals with the homes, the residential homes. This is things that people actually own. And this is a regular homeowners association, which is governed by the rules of Chapter 720. Now, I know people realize, hey, homeowners associations are always strict about aesthetics. But CROA in the Celebration is even more strict. Here's why. The aesthetic standards actually cannot be materially altered without the approval of the Celebration Company, i.e. Disney. So Disney's got to come in, and they've still got their little rat's paw in there to control the aesthetic standards. So the Residential Owners Association is in charge of enforcing those, telling people when they're out of compliance, but they can't deviate too far without the approval of the rat. So the rat still has their kind of hand in on that. Also, there's the non-residential owners. This is the commercial owners of in Celebration, or CANOA, the Non-Residential Owners Association. Now, this was currently, at least at my time, still had some TCC representation, some Disney representation. However, it will transfer over to a commercial owner control board after Disney sells 90% of the commercial properties. I think they may have gotten through that threshold, particularly with their Island Village development. We'll talk about that very shortly. But that's a non-owners association. So that has covenants that may apply to businesses, let's say Publix, or let's say your convenience store. It needs to be built to a certain aesthetic, the Disney aesthetic, or rather the celebration aesthetic. There's a joint committee which has meetings between the Residential Owners Association, the Non-Residential Owners Association, and the Celebration Company. So these are folks that come together to meet about issues of joint concern. And of course, when the Residential Owner Association and Non-Owner Association are 90% sold out, it goes over to full residential control and they kick Disney out. I believe they may have gotten there at this point right now. Now, you've got a community service organization, which is a CCS, which is a 501c3 kind of volunteer organization. And then last but not least, you've got the Celebration CDD, which is the government, which levies taxes to really pay for road lights, street sweeping, common area landscaping, street trees, which are a pain in Celebration if you've ever driven through, and public parks, weed and mosquito control. You've also got a commercial district, and this is where Disney has huge control and huge power over Celebration, that they managed to wiggle their way into permanently controlling, as a corporation, the Enterprise Community Development District. And that is entirely controlled by TCC, the Celebration Company. There's not a series of businesses. There's not, a representative amount of businesses. It's all the Celebration Company, and they control water, reclaimed water, and sewer, as well as having the power over lights and et cetera in commercial areas. So one big way they've still got power over Celebration is that water, that reclaimed water, and the sewer. That's something that they can charge rates for. And frankly, this is something that I hope is investigated in the future as to whether their rate setting is fair, whether what they're charging for water, sewer, reclaimed is actually fair, and whether their structure is fair. Shouldn't the residents that they're providing that to have some say and some input into that, the provision of services for those residents? Shouldn't they have some control over that? Shouldn't it be truly public? Is it really okay that this public entity is run solely by Disney? That's something that perhaps after we see the issue with Reedy Creek, we might want more investigation in as a state. So if you look at the development standards in Celebration, most people know Celebration by the very trademark water tower. This is a very clear sign of Celebration, and many people would recognize this coming into Celebration if you're driving on in. You also could see, if you go to an aerial view, this is the downtown. That initial photo right here that you saw, that is actually right here in the center. This is the commercial area around a stormwater pond. Some people might call it a lake, but it's really just a place to hold runoff, because all of this area was a giant drained swamp. This was all swampland that was drained for residential homes. And this core area is the town center where the businesses are. And right behind that is the initial construction of homes in Celebration Village. And you can see far in the background, if you really squint there, you can see the Epcot ball, you can see the Dolphin and Swan Hotel, you can see Expedition Everest, Magic Kingdom, a lot of those things in the background of the shot here of the aerial. And of course, this is another photo of the downtown, as well as what the typical construction looks like in Celebration. And this is very specific because the aesthetic and the plan that they're going for, that TCC and Disney were going for, is called New Urbanism. New Urbanism. And New Urbanism is a concept that was fully implemented in Celebration. Now, some people may say that it looks a lot like the Stepford Wives, and say Celebration looks a lot like the movie The Stepford Wives. And that's because it's really meant to be a more tight community that allows for more walking, biking, and is really made for other modes of transportation other than just driving. Now, this is key here. Placemaking in public space. So new urbanist streets are designed for people rather than cars and accommodate multimodal transportation, including walking, driving, transit use, walking, bicycling, transit use, and driving, with lots of plazas, squares, sidewalks, cafes, porches, and parks. So you can see this type of design in Alexandria, Virginia is very much like over in Celebration. So they wanted to keep that strict, which is why they have very strict restrictive covenants, which the Celebration Company, as well as the Residential Owners Association, still maintains tight control of. And now this is the absolute plan of Celebration. Now I'll zoom in here for you, benefit of you guys. This original area, the Celebration Village, was the original area that Disney built out. Now, each of these successful villages, as they're called within Celebration, were built oftentimes by different developers. And there are many different villages: the North Village, West Village, East Village, Artisan Park, South Village, and Roseville Corner. These are all different villages. And there's a latest development, which is called Island Village, which was built by Mattamy Homes down here at the end. So right past Celebration High School, they built that at the end. And with this development, I do believe that the majority of the residential build out is done. There's not much space left that can be developed in Celebration. So it's very likely that all the turnover there will happen very shortly, if it hasn't happened already. And of course, within Island Village, this is the plan here, and this is what the buildings look like. You can see they still generally look close together, community focused, very much new urban. Even if they're a little teensy bit cookie cutter, they still look like that. Now, what does the future hold for Celebration? Well, Celebration once looked into becoming its own city. However, at the time, they were not dense enough. They did a study and they did not have enough density. However, Celebration may now actually have enough density to qualify for its city status. Now, the big thing that's going to hit Celebration is if they become a city, they're going to need a police force. They're going to need to either contract with outside agencies, whether it's Osceola or Kissimmee, to provide those services, or provide it themselves by hiring Celebration cops. Now, that is a burden on them, which they will either have to increase taxes for, or prospectively, if they actually do become a city and they get revenue from the gas tax, which the local governments typically get, then they may be able to afford that as well. So they may be able to afford that because they're going to get that extra tax revenue, not just from gas, but as well as other taxes they'll be able to bring in. And they will have much greater powers, much akin to what Reedy Creek had originally, which is the powers of a city. Actually, Reedy Creek had beyond the powers of a city. But finally, if Celebration became a city, it would be equal to what the current CFTOD is by and large. So they've become a city. Now, that would be very interesting for Disney, because then Disney would have a city on its doorstep. And another big thing is when it becomes a city, remember, a lot of those restrictive covenants and things that bind private entities do not bind governments. When I was representing Celebration CDD, a special district, a type of government, we had to often remind Disney, as well as the Residential Owners Association, that their rules didn't apply to us. We were a government and that didn't apply to us. The same would apply to the city. So they wouldn't have to follow any of Disney's schemes. Now, it is smart to be consistent and thoughtful and respectful of an aesthetic. And I do think it is smart to comply when you can. But if it's cost prohibitive, if it's somewhere that folks don't look, well, then maybe you can just use a regular fence instead of a special green coated fence that is Celebration green. That is an actual thing. I am not making that up. So I think Celebration does have a bright future ahead, particularly now that it's more built out. But as it moves into the future, we're going to see it become more and more independent from Disney. And as it becomes more independent from Disney, I think you will see more clashing between Celebration and the Mouse, the company that started this. It may not be Epcot. It may not be the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, but I think Celebration will have a huge impact on Disney, on Central Florida, and on really the whole picture of what is a development in Florida. That being said, guys, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Peace.